I would like my special guest to introduce himself to the audience.
Hi everyone, my name is Michael. I am well, I'm an Africanist, if I could use that term. And what does that mean? Well, we look at the political, the spiritual, we look at the economic, we look at the uh, every aspect actually of the continent. Is a holistic view on how we could produce, how we could move forward, and in that case. Uh, I wouldn't. I'm very careful not to use the word social critic because that's not necessarily what I tend to do. I just analyze things and I talk about solutions. And so the simplest way to describe myself would be just be an Africanist and an Africanist to the core. So that's pretty much all that. I mean, that is all in one word. Okay.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Michael, for letting us know who you are. Today, I have a very important question that I want to ask you because our people back home, we don't really know the importance of an election. And just as Barack Obama states that elections do have consequences, I want you to share with us how important, how vital, how crucial an election can have on a nation, present and also future wise.
So I'm not really sure Barack Obama was the first person to uh, coin that. Uh, but and mentioning that is very important because if you look at the history of, I mean, from time, especially since the development of the democratic system, every single election that's been there has had consequences. So I'm sure somewhere someone had said the election had consequences. Now, again, I say that because the reality of the consequences of elections have not, because people tend to be sometimes superlative in our modern day about everybody says this is the election of all elections, but
Mm.
there's been a history of how the votes and leadership, or in some cases rulership, have determined the destiny of entire peoples, have determined the destiny of races, the actual tribes. And, you know, think of Rwanda, think of even the Black community in the West, in America, and in places like Canada. So whoever you're voting would not have just an effect on that current generation, but it has ripple effects uh, throughout the generations to come. So to say elections have consequences is an understatement. It's an understatement. Again, it's been a sentiment that predates Obama, predates anybody you could think of really, especially since the um, democratic system was, you know, basically instituted. And it also predates the democratic system because, again, like I said, whoever rules is in charge of a region, a territory, their decisions essentially affects the rest of the world in one way or the other, right? Little country like Venezuela, it's relatively not so popular these days, except, well, most recently. But for a long time, Venezuela was very instrumental in trades, in especially because of the oil, gas, right? So even a relatively less popular country, if you want to use that term, like Venezuela, has impacted certain policies, or certain, not necessarily policies, certain economic, uh, consequences, if you want to say, in some places like, well, even like in the Philippines or in Madagascar. Of course, one way or the other, directly or indirectly. Um, Again, so the point I'm just making is one decision from one country can affect the entire globe. That's essentially what I'm saying. And I use that example because the more obvious and simpler example would be things that happen in the United States, right? It tends to affect almost the whole world. So yes, again, to say elections have consequences is an understatement.
So, you mentioned something earlier on that sometimes the slogan, whenever there's an election time, the slogan is, uh, some. You said something before that this is the election of all
Yes,
elections,
it's yes,
you know,
yes, it's
and
such a
and
sentiment.
and
Yes,
and
it's
we have
such
heard that
that's
so
yeah,
many times, you know. So anytime we have an election,
yes,
the politicians will state that this election is vital. This election will be to change. This election will
mhm,
change everything. Like for example, in the U.S., the
yeah,
coming election will change so
mhm,
many things. The laws about women's rights, the laws about the economy, and all that
mhm,
stuff. So, like you mentioned that,
mhm,
let's say if one country can affect the whole world, and you mentioned
mhm,
Venezuela and the US. So, but let's focus
mhm,
on Africa, especially let's say the
mhm.
Nigerian election. What do you think? Do you think an election in Nigeria can affect the the continent of Africa, or maybe the region of West Africa, because of just an election in Nigeria? Because I know
Mhm.
Nigeria is a powerhouse in Africa, and whatever happens there
Yes,
will definitely affect the continent, and
it
also the
was.
region.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm going to answer, well, hopefully answer two questions in one. First of all, it's going to be, a, should I say, an addendum to the previous statement? I'm going to add to the previous statement about when they say elections are, this is the all be all election, right? Now, that has been especially, I mean, everybody says that, but it's always especially true when the rights of people groups or the destiny of a country would be uh, affected by again the decision, right, that is being made in that election in such a drastic way that it could change the fabric of that society, right? It can change the fabric of that continent. And as I said earlier, to my point, that it will definitely also shape something in the rest of the world, right? So before I come to the African answer, and one of the reasons why I use Venezuela is because that has been a significant shift from what Venezuela used to be. Venezuela used to be a very powerful, rich country. And then one election was enough to change everything about the country, right?
Mm,
Uh, and I say that very humbly and carefully because, again, uh, you know, history is not so black and white, right? There's a few things that uh, gets lost in the story, right?
yeah.
But there is a lot of things that we can extrapolate from the Venezuelan story to Africa. So this brings me to the second part of my answer, or I should say the second question. Now, arguably, Nigeria is the I'm very, I'm using this very loosely and carelessly, but Nigeria could be said to be the Africa of, sorry, the America of Africa, in the sense that it seems to be one of the most, if not the most popular African country. And America is the most popular country in the West and in the world, right? Arguably, again. So a lot of things that happens in Nigeria, and actually Nigeria is a central hub for a lot of, and that's because again, Nigeria, just like the United States, is a central hub for a lot of the trades, culture, and even religion, right? And so the geopolitics and actually just the politics generally is very crucial to shaping uh, the country, and by that extension, the well, is very important shaping the country and the culture, and by that extension, is it will shape the rest of the uh, countries or a political ecosystem that depends or is you know affected by uh, Nigeria, for example. So what I'm saying simply is Nigeria is a powerhouse, as you said, and the election, the the outcome of the elections in Nigeria, and by that I say the economic policies will affect the rest of the African continent and also the rest of the world. Now, one thing I might add is a new rising star. The rising star is Rwanda, right? That's a rising star country to look at. Now, as we'll talk shortly, the as we'll see shortly, the effects of certain policies in a country like Rwanda after uh, such horrible series of events that occurred, the genocide and all that stuff, right? If if the person that takes over the country is not able to, well, unite the country or boost the economy or rally people behind him or her and get the country going, then you're going to have a really really tough situation, right?
Mhm.
However, if some innovative person gets the reins of the country, then at some point we stop talking about the genocide in Rwanda and focus on the successes that they have enjoyed thus far. And again, depends on who you're asking, right? They would say, "Hey, this is success," but objectively, Rwanda has come from such horrible difficulties to where they are today, and that is to say that whatever is going on in Nigeria right now would have a would have would have to the history books would have to write that this is a turning point, right? This is a turning point in the history of the country. So that's why I went into this whole tangent just to say that Nigeria is at a state right now where whoever takes over the country has the chance or the opportunity to write the future of the country. Is the country going to stand or is it going to fall? Right? Is it going to get worse than this? And when it gets worse than this, I'm sorry, it's again it depends on who you ask. Is the country going to fall? Right? So this is really the question that Nigerians should be asking, and it goes beyond the politics and it goes to the individual, right? So yeah, that's why I'm going to stop my answers, right?
Thank you. Thank you for just to highlight some of the things that you have mentioned is that um,
Yeah.
elections do, whoever comes in power, they can determine to write the future of the country. Either the country will rise or either the country will fall. And look at Rwanda, the leadership of Rwanda. Just that one election when the people voted a leader, and now
Mm.
look at the future of Rwanda.
Rwanda.
Rwanda is a
Yeah.
rising
Mm.
nation. It's not a falling
It's
nation.
really rising.
Most times when an election takes place in Africa, it's either the nation will rise or the nation will fall, right? So
Mm.
this leads me to the impact of an election. Obviously, the impact could be rise or fall because I
Mm-hmm.
think it was on C. Maxwell. It states that everything rises and falls on leadership.
That's right.
Everything rises and falls on leadership. So if you want a country to rise, it depends on the leadership. If you want the country to fall, it depends on the leadership. So this is a profound
That's right.
statement by John Maxwell that everything rises and falls on leadership. So what is your take
That's
on the
right.
impact of an election that election can have in the country itself and also the surrounding nations, around that
Hmm.
country
Hmm.
and also the global village at large.
Thank you. So, from my introduction, that what I was saying about taking a holistic view on Africa, right? It's always been a case where we would look at Africa in the maybe economic side. Actually, most of the things has been politics or sports, really, and sports just really be during the World Cups or the Olympics, right? But really during the World Cups. And so, if it's not about some political thing, it's going to be about the World Cup, and that's barely mentioned. And then the key thing is always been about some kind of outbreak of disease or the other. So my what I posit today is that we should look first of all have the mind a holistic view of the continent. Now that would be in the political sphere, which is important, which is exactly the main uh, question you're asking and the main point of our discussion today. But that is not enough because there's things like, of course, the economy, which is really tied to the politics. But apart from that, is about the social welfare of the people. It's also about things like education and not only formal education. It's not only formal education. There's all types of Africa has had a history of a different alternative forms of education as we see them today. But there has been a history of where people have been uh, uh, students, and of course every culture has some form of education and schooling. So I just want to really highlight that the education in Africa doesn't only have to do with the formal education in the formal sense. Then you have the religious aspect of things, very important. The religious aspect of the continent or the country, is important to view. Then we have also a very key one, which again is barely talked about in Africa: technology. Technology is a very important thing. Now, I could go on and down the list, but I really wanted to highlight some of these things because they are key things about the Nigeria and Africa at large. So yes, we established the political decision made in an election will affect all these other things. And so let's see what happens if you take get somebody that has a vision, a foresight. Or actually, let me start from the one that if you let me start from the opposite of that. So if you elect someone that is selfish or doesn't have sight really, or is not competent, guess what happens? Either I'm going to add a third state, which is things remain the same, right? So it's either we talk about if it's either it rises or it falls. Sometimes things could remain the same.
Yeah.
However, in Nigeria, at this current state, things cannot remain the same. Things will
Mm,
either go worse or they will get better.
mm,
Some other countries, things may remain the same, but in Nigeria, specifically in this particular time, and with the global climate, right? The global geopolitical and socioeconomic climate, Nigeria would get worse if you take someone that is incompetent,
mm,
someone that doesn't have the foresight. And sometimes someone could be incompetent in doing certain things. Someone could, not everybody could be a business guy, have the business sense or some kind of economic savvy, but they can have competence in hiring the best people that would take care of the rest of everything. So we're gonna again, I don't want to jump the gun and talk about someone with competence or someone with sight. But again, if someone without competence or someone that is short-sighted or someone that is just selfish in out there for themselves or is power hungry, then guess what? Um, Things will get worse. You would have of course, crime is going to get worse, uh, and we have more toys to increase. It's just, I was talking about the other day about the irony of how we have more technology, but we have higher crimes. You know, so crime would increase, violence. Uh, there's rumors of second civil war in Nigeria. There is rumors of, I mean, people are already getting sick. People are running and fleeing from the country. There's so many things happening. The land gets deserted. And then you have a bunch of these young folks that whose talent and divine graces would just get wasted because no one is tapping into the divine resources, which is humans. That's what that is, divine resource humans. The youthful strength and grace and skills, right? So then it will lead to things where apart from the increasing tribal tensions, you have increasing religious tensions. And in the religious sphere, if people are short-sighted there, it only feels the short-sightedness, I guess, or it only feels it just feels the strife. It feels the turmoil or the antagonism in that side of things. In the economic, I don't need to say what happened in the economy. I already said it, right? There's really nothing. People can't afford things now, as I'm talking to you right now. People can't afford to eat. And then just imagine if we're already having a hard time, it's just going to get worse.
Yeah.
And then with that, you can have foreign interventionism from China or from the United States or from whichever, Russia, whoever is grasping for global power, global supremacy, they could step in. And when they're stepping in, they are not stepping in as friends. They're really stepping in as, hey, this is going to be colonialism 2.0, right? So there's
Mm.
all these things, and because the so-called leader or ruler, I would say rather, is short-sighted, it's very easy for them to be bought over.
Mm.
Okay, so that's it. So I could go on and on and on and about all the doom and gloom and all the things that could happen. However, one positive thing that can come out from all of that is there could be some anger and some discontent that can come out from that.
Mm.
But I don't think and I don't believe that we need to get to that point for us to wake up. We
Mm.
should not,
Mm.
because that is something that we're going to lose millions of lives.
Mm.
We don't need to lose any one life for us to wake up. We don't need even a single casualty for us to wake up.
Mm.
But imagine that scenario. We're going to end up having millions of people dying, literally dying, right? There's a bunch of things that could happen. So let's talk about the positive side, which is what you and I and every other, you know, uh, right-minded person would be hoping for. Would be hoping for someone with sight. Guess what happens? Talk about technology. I always talk about that because that's the least that talks about it. That's talked about. It's a lot of smart people in Africa. You would again develop especially the youth, and they would get involved in technology. They would produce things, and with improvement in technology, we improve trade, we improve commerce, economy is improved. You have uh, investment in education, and not only, again, I'm going to stress this, not only in formal education. You have apprenticeship because people have money to take on people and train them. You have uh, people just being interested because now we have new new industries created, right? And so you have that turnaround. What also happens is if you have good and 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 and, and, and really good sighted leadership. They're able to mobilize people of different religious views and perspectives, and they're able to he or she is able to create a coalition of people from different tribes, different backgrounds, and there is the unity. There's a beauty in the unity because when these different people groups come together, they're able to work together towards the same goal. Now, really, they're only able to really work together as far as the leader can inspire the vision in all these groups. So we need a leader with vision that is able to inspire that same vision in all these groups. That's really where it works. And so this is where my response was start turning away from the politics or whoever is being elected to the people. Because if the people don't see the same vision, they can't, they can't fight for it. They can't pursue it, right? So you need someone who is able to inspire the people. And guess what happens again? Technology, economy. There is, you know, the, the social economic side gets ramped up. With that culture, culture is also highlighted. And Nigeria that tends to import everything, including culture, Western culture. They all of a sudden begin to appreciate what we have as Africans, and we celebrate our culture, knowing that we have, and we see, something to be said for self-esteem, right? If you see that everything is going well in your place, you are less inclined to look for another place. That's why Americans tend to be very braggadocious about about that country. Every successful country would give a flair of patriotism because they've had some level of success. And so imagine a very successful Nigeria. Imagine a very successful Africa. We don't need to import any culture. We don't need to import anything from anybody, really. We can trade with people, but we don't need to. Right? We don't need to uh, import anything that is not going to be suitable for our benefit and our advancement. So to say that again, elections have consequences is an understatement. So I'm just imagining, apart from the good roads and connectivity, that's again part of the trade, which the leadership, or yes, that's going to be leadership, not rulership now, which the leadership would introduce or bring about, is going to be significant transformation from the grassroots. And that's a place that really a lot of work should start. Because if you can start from the grassroots, if you can get the grassroots uh, improved, then as you go, it builds up from the ground up. That's what I would say, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a rather long answer to to the question. What is this? That's the consequence. So I've given you two pictures. One is this house is gonna, it's not just it's already crumbling, but here and then at this point it really goes all the way, crashes all the way. And then you have on this other hand, the right hand, you have someone that's able to say, you know what, sometimes we need to break this apart, build it from the ground up, or we have to reinforce the foundations, right? So that is really that's really. I just want you to look at those two pictures. Look at the picture of Nigeria and Africa, where you have kids that are eating scrap from the ground, to and then compare that with contrast that to an Africa where you have those same kids are working on some really advanced technology where they had just had a very nice meal, you know, and the air is clear, everything is good, you know. I'm just I'm looking at the ladder, and I'm saying this is what I believe God would help us with.
Well, thank you very much.